My dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the forces of the group of forces east of the armored force of the Russian Federation continue their offensive operation. So the Russians during the previous 48 hours managed to improve their position significantly. Once again, this is the situation on the ground by the end of the 14th of November of 2025. As you can see, most of these territories used to be considered as a gray zone or the territory under complete control of the armored forces of Ukraine. But by the end of the 15th of November, everything changed. So this is the situation by the 15th of November, and we have colored most of these fields and most of the gray zone under complete control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, based on the report of the Minister of Defense and based on the video that was published by the Group of Forces East. In this video, we can see how Russians were fighting for the settlement of Yablokova. So the Russians were bombing, the Russians were securing and clearing this territory with drones and infantry, and in the final part of this video we can see at least two episodes how Russians were raising their Russian flag in the most western and in the most eastern parts of the settlement. Once again, based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and these are the changes between the 14th and the 15th of November of 2025. And today we got additional changes on the ground. According to them, the Russians, after the fall of the settlement of Yablokova, began advancing in the southern direction with the purpose to outflank Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian positions in the villages by the name of Vesele, Zeleny Gai, and Chervone. So currently, according to this configuration of the front line, we see that these three villages were caught by Russians in Corroding. We adjusted the map based on the videos, based on the two videos that were published by pro-Ukrainian sources. In these videos, we could see how Russians were attacking this territory. We're talking about infantry, how the Russians were securing this tree line, and later another video was published how Ukrainians with FPV drones were attacking Russian forces. So now we see that the villages of Vesele, Zeleny Gai, and Chervone were cut and cauldron by the Russians, and this situation started and happened already yesterday. This is not something that is happening and taking place right now. So maybe but right now the situation is completely different, but most likely during the upcoming 12 hours we're going to get additional changes. So furthermore, several pro-Russian sources have already reported that the village of Vesele was already captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and that Ukrainians are retreating from this area without any chances to save control over the territory. So we believe that in coming 2-3 days, these three villages would be captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and then there is going to be just one village left, the village of Zatishye, before the city of Huliaipole. Furthermore, we are waiting for updates from the territory of Rovnopole. Some sources reported that today the village would be the control over the village by the Russians would be confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. So let's wait for this, and if it happens, then we will discuss the situation during the next update. The Ukrainians are trying to improve their positions by sending additional forces, reinforcements, and reserves in this area, but Russians control the R-85 road. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were trying to redeploy additional air defense system, but the Russians discovered the redeployment of this system and destroyed this system with FPV drone. So the roads under control, the roads under complete Russian fire control. The battle for Huliaipole is about to start, and this is going to be the decisive battle for the entire Zaporozhye direction, because if Ukrainians lose the city of Huliaipole, most likely the Ukrainians will lose the city of Orekhov as well. At the same time, the armed forces of the Russian Federation of the 36th Army continued their offensive operation. Today, the Group of Forces East published a short article about the situation on the ground, and according to this article, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions on the way towards the villages of Radosne and Chaivka. So it seems that in coming 2-3 days, these two villages would be also captured by Russians, and right after this situation, the Russians will continue offensive operation both in the western direction and in the southern direction as well. So the situation, as we can see, is very complicated for the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pavlograd direction. I would like to remind you that during the previous days we received lots of updates from this area. The Russians by the end of the 14th of November managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Huliaipole. By the end of the 15th and by the beginning of the 16th of November of 2025, the Russians, according to different sources, managed to improve their position significantly between the village of Huliaipole and the settlement of Varona. So we're talking about these territories. There are lots of fields, there are lots of fortifications. All these territories were captured by Russians by the morning of the 16th. So it seems that the Russians are about to start their offensive operation, a major offensive operation in this area, with the purpose to secure the village of Velika Mikhailovka and to force Ukrainians to fall back. In the Novopavlovka direction, the Russians continued their offensive operation. The Ukrainians were very surprised when the Russians launched their offensive operation in this area. Several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians managed to cross 10 kilometers without being discovered by Ukrainian forces. And the reason of this is that the Russians were using a fog screen for protection purposes. There were several days with a very big fog across this territory, and the Russians used that advantageous situation to begin their offensive. And Ukrainians, according to information we have, discovered that the Russians launched their offensive operation only when the Russians with vehicles answered the settlement of Novopavlovka. Several sources reported that there were more than 10 vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, that answered the settlement of Novopavlovka, landed infantry. Then those 10 vehicles returned back, let's say, to the settlement of Dachne, loaded additional batch of infantry, and returned to the settlement of Novopavlovka once again. So currently we're saying that currently there are hundreds maybe of Russian soldiers on the territory of the settlement who are trying to secure the area. So this is one of the episodes of clashes that were taking place during the previous days. The Russians, under the cover of fog, were moving inside of the settlement of Novopavlovka, and Ukrainians were attacking them. So according to all these changes and according to updates we have, the Russians by the morning of the 16th of November established control or infiltrated across 60 or 70% of the settlement of Novopavlovka. The Ukrainian positions are located just in the northern parts, to the north of the river of Salona. The Russians are about to secure the southern and the eastern parts of the settlement. Now let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous days, Ukrainians made lots of attempts to counterattack Russian positions from the settlement of Grishno in the northwestern part of the city. During the previous 48 hours, there were lots of counterattacks carried out by Ukrainians, and Ukrainians published this video where we can see clashes exactly in this area. So Ukrainians were using 425th Separate Assault Regiment of the Armored Forces of Ukraine for these purposes. Very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the northwestern part of the city or not, or Ukrainians just counterattacked to distract attention of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Anyway, based on this video, we haven't adjusted anything because this video we are waiting for additional clarifications and additional proofs. But I would like to remind you that according to information we have, Syrsky prepared lots of forces to counterattack the city, the positions around the city of Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka, and Kupinsk. The sources are saying that Syrsky introduced 10,000 soldiers to every single direction. 10,000 to Pokrovsk, 10,000 to Konstantinovka, and 10,000 to Kupinsk. His task is to unblock the Ukrainians on the territory of Mirnograd, but it seems that nothing will work out. Now let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Siversk. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded around the settlement of Zvanovka. The Russians are about to finish their securing and clearing operation of this area. They are trying to maintain the lines and to shorten the distances. They need to clear this pocket before moving further inside of the city of Siversk itself. Furthermore, Russians published videos of how they were after withdrawing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine to the east of the city across this dense network of the fortifications. This video confirms that these positions are still under complete control of the armored forces of Ukraine. And despite different talks and rumors that the territory were captured, we see that these territories are under control of the armored forces of Ukraine. As for the Kupiansk direction, several pro-Russian sources reported that the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions along the river Voskol to the northwest of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. So these territories, and the most important, that this area right in front of this place where Ukrainians used to cross the river, is under complete control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. The situation in the city of Kupiansk is also very complicated for the armored forces of Ukraine, but as we discussed a minute ago, Syrskyi prepared additional 10,000 soldiers to this area with the purpose to unblock the contingent of the armored forces of Ukraine on the eastern bank of the river Voskol. So as we can see, the situation on the ground is very critical and very difficult for the armored forces of Ukraine, and this happens at the same time with the corruption scandal with Zelensky and his inner circle. Bags of cash and golden toilet, corruption crisis engulfs Zelensky's government. An article with this headline was published in the Financial Times. It discusses the corruption scandal surrounding Zelensky's inner circle. Law enforcement officers and conducting searches in luxury Kiev apartments, one of which features a golden toilet. Photos of sports bags stuffed with cash, audio recordings of officials discussing money laundering schemes. Zelensky's administration has become embroiled in a major corruption scandal, the publication writes. And you know what? The most interesting thing that the Ukrainian authorities found just one solution how to reduce the pressure in this area. Zelensky's advisor: corruption is an eternal part of the modern economy. This is how Podolyak commented on the corruption scandal in Zelensky's close circle. According to him, such cases arise in democratic systems, and corruption is an integral part of modern economy. So this is how Zelensky and his office is trying to reduce the pressure around the corruption scandal. Anyway, we believe that this is not going to work out, and most likely Zelensky will start something new with this. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.